it was just so important to hear you say that love can be unconditional, but relationships are not.
Yeah, we use that language, right? Like, oh, this is unconditional. It's like,
Right.
no, love, I do believe can be, right? We
Right.
can have an unconditional love for someone, but we must have conditions in our relationships,
Yep.
right? There must be, right? Because otherwise people can say, well, I can do anything I want to do. Not that most people operate this way, right? But I can do anything that I want to, and then you need to choose this relationship anyway. No, no. There are rules, there are expectations, there are agreements, spoken ones ideally, right, that we have. And, I can love someone, of course, but choose not to be in relationship with them if the way that they show up, the way that they talk to me, the way that they treat me doesn't match with what is workable for me in that chapter of my life. We've all heard, oh, love is unconditional, relationships are unconditional. It's like that message was it felt like such a dangerous one, right? Because it almost forced people to have to bypass their experiences and their feelings and be
Yeah.
okay, or like find a way to be okay with things. And I think this is such a healthy way to exist in the world, right? That like, yeah, to find what the conditions are, what we want to create out of this relationship together,
Yeah.
what we are. And listen, like it can ebb and flow and it can move a bit. Like we can have an expectation, if you're in a monogamous relationship, for example, that we're not going to cheat on each other. Okay. Right. Then that could shift because someone could cheat. And that doesn't mean necessarily, right, that relationship is going to be over immediately, right? There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of navigation that can happen in that space. But I think it's, we know we have to check in with each other over and over and over again to make sure that the conditions of our relationships are up to speed. A lot of times couples, for example, they have certain expectations or agreements for the relationship, and then they never check in with each other for the next 5 years or 10 years,
Totally.
and it's like, wait, like the agreements are changing, and we
Yeah.
need to be able to communicate about that
It's like
and
not updating your will and having
right,
kids and all kinds of different things. It's like, no, like obviously things have changed. A lot
right,
has happened. You've got to
right.
keep that stuff up.
Yeah. But I think there's an empowerment in that sentence, right? It's like love can be unconditional, but relationships cannot, right? They have to require that. And there's an empowerment there that says, like, I don't have to accept anything.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to just sit here and be like, well, because I love you, because we agreed to this, like anything can happen here. Like I'm allowed to have conditions to being in this relationship. These are the conditions for us to succeed as
Right.
friends, as partners, as this, as that, whatever it is. And to not have to be afraid of communicating that and sharing that. And again, of course, right, like setting the boundaries around that.
Yeah, it could be called unboundaried love too. It
Right.
feels like another word for it that could
Yeah.
replace it. But I like to think of it as like these conditions or boundaries or
Mhm.
whatever the word you want to use for it for
Mhm.
the relationship that's not unconditional is like it's supposed to help you know how to
Mhm.
love me right. Like I'm
Right.
not going to make it a freaking mystery. I'm
Right.
going to tell you what you have to do. This is the
Yeah.
key to the kingdom, right? If you
Yeah.
can live, if this works for you, great. If it doesn't, fine. We all should
Mhm.
move on. But that's like unboundaried, unconditional love is not that helpful
No.
because it's impossible to imagine that we don't have triggers and we don't have wounds and we don't have things we're working through. And like you said, sometimes we're more sensitive, sometimes we're less sensitive. We just don't navigate life like a Buddha,
Mhm.
we navigate life being triggered. And unless we tell our partner or the people that are close to us what those landmines are and what it makes us comfortable and feel safe, like how can they be expected to do a good job?
Right.
It's like giving a pilot an airplane and no lesson. It's like we're
Yeah.
going to crash.
Yeah.
They're going to
Yeah.
crash and burn,
No, I think it's like the conditions are actually what allows a relationship to thrive,
Yeah,
right? It's like otherwise
totally.
it can just be chaos, and
Totally.
that's it, is like, no, this isn't meant to like squeeze something, right? It's meant to create the environment for the relationship to evolve and thrive. And so, yeah, I love that one too. I'm glad that was one that stood out to you.
Yeah, those were the 4 most transformative for
Wow.
sure, and I mean, look, I, like, have those were literally, like, I always write my notes, like, they are right at the top, and I have, like, infinitely more questions I was gonna talk to you about. Of course, some of them got a
Uh-huh.
little bit included, but one of them
Yeah.
that I wanna ask about, because this feels a little nuanced, but and like, I don't quite have a grasp as to
Mhm.
how to see this, feel this clearly, and execute
Mhm.
this, so maybe you can help me. What does it take to help someone see you, or to see someone else? Like, people always say and want to feel seen. They want
Mhm.
to feel heard. Like, this is something feels like a really deep level, maybe not the deepest level, but this is a very deep level that creates a tremendous connection.
Mhm.
So, is it something I have to do? Is it something someone else has to do? Is this some magical connection that you just have to find the right person and you feel seen?
Mhm.
Help a girl out.
Mhm.
Help a boy
Yeah.
out. Help us out.
Yeah. I the first thing that comes to mind is that it can be very confronting to see another when what is being asked to be seen requires that person to then see that in themselves.
Oh, man. Fucking
And
relationships.
yeah, and it's that part can be because when one person is being vulnerable, like, again, we can listen high level and like, yeah, okay, thanks for sharing that with me, yada, 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 right? Like many people can kind of go through those motions. But I think when we're talking about being seen, that like the nuanced scene, um, we're talking about uh someone really deeply connecting to the experience. There being a level of, not that they necessarily walked the same experiences as you did, or can relate firsthand to that specific thing, but there's an access point that happens when a person has seen a deep pain within themselves that then allows them to see a deep pain within another. And I
Mm,
think when a person is asking to have a deep pain of theirs seen by a partner, and a partner or a friend or whomever has resisted, consciously, unconsciously, it doesn't matter, but has resisted or not been able to see their own deep pain, that can be incredibly challenging. I think it's one of the biggest constraints that I notice. And, because it's like, if I have to connect to it and see it with you, then there's an access point for me. And sometimes people don't wanna
don't wanna
connect
go
to it.
there.
They don't wanna go there, they don't know how to go there, it feels too scary to go there. It
Yeah,
means that the idealized, story of their childhood or their parent or whomever is
yeah,
going
that's
to
true.
get, shifted slightly, right? Like, all of those things can be a deterrent in
Yeah.
that way. And so a lot of times, right, it's like, oh, to go into, intimacy, right? Going inwards, seeing my inner world, seeing your inner world, having you see my inner world, having you see your inner world, right? It's like, where the blocks are for the self, there are blocks for others. There have to be, right? Because otherwise it requires something that you're not ready to meet in yourself. And so I
Does it
think that's
have to be
one.
the same thing? Are you saying that if someone has, like, a wound where they have been abandoned in some way, or
Mhm,
someone has a wound where they were abused in some
mhm.
way, physically maybe, like,
Yeah,
whatever that may be, does it have to mirror itself, or is it that someone can empathize because they've been hurt this amount, or this,
right.
or
No,
hurt
it
by maybe this
doesn't.
person?
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be the same.
Okay.
Um, No, not at all. And it doesn't need to be the same story in the sense of like, "Oh, that's the reason why I can't see you because that's too close to mine," right? I
Okay.
think to me it's much more about, right, that level, like the connection to vulnerability, that fear of like what this is going to open up. And so
Mm,
I can stay surface level with you, right? Where I'm like, again, like I said, like, thank you for sharing. And I, appreciate you
Okay.
and can
Yeah.
see
So
that.
it's like when someone shares something that's like makes them cry, or like something that hurts them, like makes them feel very insecure, then
Mhm.
you go, okay, here's something that makes me really emotional and something that makes me really feel insecure. And
Mhm.
then they don't have to be the same at all, but they invoke the same emotion.
Right.
They give you the same, it's like, it's almost like it's like an access point to the
Mhm.
amount of your heart that you're willing to show them and your
Totally.
truth. And
Yeah.
you go, look, I'm going to bring in 2 big bags full. Here you go. And you bring me your bags full. And then you kind of go, okay.
Yeah.
And that is what creates the I feel seen, is that you're willing to be that level of vulnerable with someone.
Mhm.
Because, as another thing that I like to say is, you know, trust is a big thing in a relationship. And it's like, yeah, I want to trust you, but if you don't give me anything to trust, how do you know I'm trustworthy?
Right.
Like, you have to
Right.
give someone something to be trusted with. And
Yeah.
so you do that for each other. You kind of go, okay, I'm going to meet you there.
Mhm.
And that is the I feel
Mhm.
seen, I feel heard.
Mhm. Another reason that I've seen is when now an adult, who was once a child, who um, was an emotional support or caretaker for a parent, for example, um, where they were in a role that they should not have been in,
Right.
and that parent overshared. They let that child in on very intimate details of their life, their feelings, right? Like, the child was really just like kind of along for the ride and saw a lot of it. That is another example where I can see sometimes a person be really closed off or shut down to seeing, feeling alongside of a partner, for example, because of the very painful experience and exhaustive experience of being in a role of caretaking that emotional experience of a parent. And so, again, right, sort of an unresolved stuff, right? But the unresolved stuff that blocks a person from being able to actually open themselves up, connect, see, hear, understand, be a partner to someone in the way, if we're prioritizing intimacy and vulnerability, right? And so, a lot of this, well, I guess I would say all of this would come from something that's unresolved, right? Like, why would I not be able to or want to see you, hear you, understand you, connect to you, be intimate, vulnerable with you? Well,
Mhm.
because there's something that's unresolved for me, whether it's, an example like I just gave of a child who had to be, the emotional caregiver of a parent to someone who has a part of their story and their own pain that they have yet to touch and be able to resolve themselves.
If you like this clip and you want to hear the whole episode, click at the bottom of your screen.